My husband and I hiked the approach trail to Springer Mountain several years back, planning to summit and return to the bottom and camp. It's summer, like 90 degrees, and besides a few trail runners early in the day, we really see no one else. It takes a few hours longer than we anticipated, and we are beat. Also, because of the way my leggings rubbed, I have the worst chafing imaginable and just do not want to hike down again. We set up to cook dinner, and a man comes from the opposite direction toward the summit. My husband strikes up a conversation, and the man agrees to give us a ride back to the park where we started. We throw our packs into his trunk, but I keep my cell phone in hand, even though it is nearly dead and I have no signal. The guy had said he knew the way to the park and could get us back quickly. But then suddenly he has taken a wrong turn, and now he has to turn around. Something about his story does not add up during the entire ride. He says his wife is in labor with their first child, but he had to get away for a bit, take a hike to clear his mind, etc. Okay, whatever. Maybe he is nervous. It happens. He just kind of rambles about weird things and then realizes, oh wait, I've taken another wrong turn. We turn onto a road and there is this old house and he wants us to get out and look at it. Won't take no for an answer. Then it gets really weird. He asks if he can take pictures of us in front of this house, standing on the porch, sitting. He is in full photo shoot mode. I want you to look happy. Now I want you to look angry, etc. We get back to the car. I'm thoroughly creeped out. He is Sheldon Cooper in Ted Bundy form. He tells my husband that his car is running hot and needs some water to cool it down. He has some in the trunk if my husband wouldn't mind getting it for him. I instinctively hop out with my husband because no way am I getting left in this car if the guy is trying to split us up. We put the water in and away we go. I am telling my husband in the car how we had to meet so-and-so tomorrow morning. We made plans. Whatever I can. Just so this man takes the hint that someone knows where we are and had plans to see us the next day. Our location was known. Exact plans were not to anyone but us. We weren't meeting anyone. I am fantastically relieved when I finally see that we are finally nearing where we park our car in the park. When we finally find it, this man will not leave while we are putting our packs and things into the car, asking our plans, etc. He asks for my phone number and I give it to him off by 1 digit. I tell my husband to go into the hotel and get us a room for the night so that we can rest. Our plan is to actually wait until he is gone and we will get a campsite. The man says, well, they have a really great dinner. I will follow you inside and see about that. I lock myself in the car and my husband delivers some spiel to the desk attendant about us needing to book a campsite, something. Can we drive around and look for an empty one? He was feeling extremely skeptical about the situation too. His plan was to say we were booking a site, wait for this guy to leave, and return to the hotel later where the guy wouldn't know our room or anything. We drive to the farthest, lowest point of the campground and sit for nearly 2 hours. It's getting dark. We are tired. We finally decide to drive through the camping area and to the hotel. Surely this guy has gone. As we drive past the tents, we see his car just sitting and waiting, where he has full view of the camping area, but can also see the hotel parking. My husband pulls a U-turn, and we book it nearly 2 hours from the park and find the worst, cheapest hotel. To this day, we swear that we dodged a bullet. This man could have committed the nearly perfect crime if he had picked us up from the top of the mountain and we just never returned to our car. The fact that he was waiting on us when we returned sealed it for us that this guy really had some major, horrible plan for us in mind. I'd been going to college here in Washington State for 2 full semesters before I finally decided to join a fraternity. I'm not a party animal or anything, but the stories I'd heard about a particular fraternity's parties were enough to convince me that I had to do whatever it took to join it. Initiation week was exactly what you'd expect. They made us stay up for several nights in a row, eat some raw sardines, stuff like that. The crowning moment of initiation was that each initiate had to spend a night in the so-called murder forest just outside the city. This forest is famous in our area for being haunted. Apparently, several serial killer victims were found there, and on top of that, people hear weird sounds sometimes. Still, lots of places have local legends, and I figured that the stories had been exaggerated to enhance our hazing experience. So the 6 other initiates and I hopped into vans and were driven to the edge of the forest. One of the older members told us that we should walk for about an hour along a path and that we'd find a campsite where we could spend the night. Each of us was carrying a backpack with a sleeping bag and tarp to lay on. I had been walking with the other guys in the group for 45 minutes. An idea crossed my mind. The rules we'd been given said we had to spend the night in the forest, not that we had to spend it in a particular area. They wanted us at that campsite so they could come in during the night and mess with us, I had no doubt. So I decided to set off into the woods by myself to avoid the hassle that sleeping in the designated campsite would bring. I congratulated myself on my smarts, thinking I had avoided any trouble. I was wrong. I walked for another 15 minutes or so by myself, lighting my way with a flashlight. I recorded some footage of me walking through the forest, which you can see. I found a nice secluded spot with a clearing. I looked around and saw it was completely empty, so I set up my tarp and laid out my sleeping bag. The forest was alive with the sounds of crickets, birds, and wind. I lay down in my sleeping bag, feeling satisfied, and flipped off the light. The forest fell silent. I don't mean to say that the wind lulled, or that there was a momentary lapse in crickets. I mean that everything that could make a sound stopped making noise all at once. It was so sudden and so complete that I thought I had gone deaf. I pulled my hand up to my ears, but when I rubbed my fingers together, the soft rustling sounded out like normal. I looked around in the pitch darkness, but a thick layer of clouds made the night nearly absolutely dark. I was fumbling for my flashlight when I felt it. A warm, humid breath spread across the back of my neck, like a person was standing 6 inches behind me, blowing slowly. It stood in stark contrast to the chilly early spring air I had been feeling up till then. My hand found the flashlight and I spun it around, illuminating the clearing behind me, revealing nothing but grass and trees. The instant my light turned on, the sound returned to the forest, crickets and cicadas chirping away softly. I started to stand up to leave, but stopped myself. I had to have been psyching myself out. All the stories from the frat must have just been getting to my head. I couldn't explain the silence, but I resolved to stay the night. I laid back down with the light and finally turned it back off. I half expected the forest sound to go with it, but thankfully the crickets and wind stayed constant. I laid in the darkness for a while, trying to relax my heart rate enough to fall asleep. After what must have been half an hour, I finally drifted off. I don't know how much time passed, but I was woken up by a new sound. It was the sound of rhythmic, heavy breathing, occasionally broken up by mumbling. The sound was coming from in front of my sleeping bag and high above me, probably some 30 feet away. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. I took a picture with the flash to light up the clearing and saw a figure in the trees staring down at me. It was a woman wearing a long white dress. She had long black hair that covered her face, and her face, it looked like the skin had worn through in places. She was staring down at me. The image from the flash was burned into my mind. I kicked out of my sleeping bag and started running away through the forest in my bare feet. I couldn't hear motion behind me, but I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the forest where I got cell service. I grilled the members of the fraternity after I got back, but they each swore that they had nothing to do with it. I had been right about them scaring the other members of the group, but they had just used air horns and guns with blanks to scare them while they slept. I guess it's possible that they were behind it all, but I can't see how they could have made the forest silent or breathed on the back of my neck when not even the other initiates knew where I was. And that woman was not something fraternity members could have created. A few summers ago, me and a few buddies went catfishing at a local reservoir. This is rural Ohio, and the reservoir was off a dirt road about 2 miles from the village it fed, which was a village of about 1,500 people. We had fished this spot tons of times, and we very rarely saw other people during the day, and we never saw anyone out there at night. So the day we went out, it was about 9 p.m, sun's going down, we had a couple cases of beer, we were planning on staying out until the sun came back up. We didn't want to be bothered. We weren't really allowed to have alcohol around the reservoir anyway, so we actually drove a dirt service road clear around the reservoir as far away as we could get from the road. This service road was nothing but compacted dirt, with tree roots running across it, areas that had washed away during flooding, fallen trees in the road that had been there for years, etc. This was not a well-travelled road, and the only way we got around it was that we all had lifted 4 trucks or jeeps. The site we pick is out on a piece of land that stretches out into the water a bit in a teardrop kind of shape, goes maybe 20 feet out into the reservoir, so we have water on all sides of us besides our back. We figure we can fish from different directions. Since we will have 5 or 6 poles in the water, it would give us a little more room to cast wath-out tangling lines. Plus, there was remnants of a fire pit and some wood that was already collected. So we start a fire, bait our poles and start drinking. We fish for 2 or 3 hours and get good and drunk. In the meantime, a thick summer fog creeps in across the lake. Then we hear a huge kersplush, and we see the ripples coming from across the lake to our right. There is maybe 50 yards of water between us and the other bank, and the fog was so thick we could not see the bank or what caused the sound, but we could see the ripples in the water once they got to us. We explain it away to a tree limb falling in the water, or maybe a beaver jumping off the bank, and we keep fishing. About 20 minutes later, another huge kersplush, and the ripples come again, and let me tell you, there was no mistaking the sound. It was not a fish flopping, and it was not a frog jumping in the water. It was the sound of a large, heavy object, like the sound someone makes when they do a cannonball off the diving board. But we explain it away as we did with the first. Shortly after that, we run out of wood for the fire. So we leave one guy to watch the poles. Me and a few buddies go out into the brush to find fallen sticks and whatnot. We all go our separate ways and meet back at the fire shortly after. One of my buddies comes back to the fire with a white jacket, a pair of rubber boots, and a clown mask in his arms. This was about the time when there were all the posts about the scary clowns who would lurk around towns to scare people. I knew those stories were bullshit, so I figured it was just left over from dumbass kids who had a party out there one night and left it. So we get the fire going again, we fish for a little while longer, when we hear twigs breaking in the woods across the lake, and then another huge curse plush. At this point, we know there is someone out there with us, and the sound has to be someone dropping something in the lake. So we call out like, "Hey, if there is someone out there, we aren't making trouble, just fishing and drinking some beers. We'd be happy to have you join us." Dead silence. So we call out again and again to no response. A couple of my buddies are seriously freaking out at this point, between the booze, the clown mask, the fog, and the mystery noises. So I get that drunk courage, and I decide we should all go walk around the bend and see just what the fuck's going on. This guy's being a fucking asshole and trying to scare us. I convinced two of my buddies to come with me, and the other two guys watched the poles. So we three trek into the brush with our flashlights, make our way through the thick-ass fog, start working around this lake, and as we go, we start finding bits of trash and saplings that had been cut down, and then more trash, and then footprints of someone in their bare feet. Which is odd, since it was so much work to get back to this spot on the lake. No one would be hiking around this far around the lake to fish in this spot. As I'm sweeping the woods with my flashlight, I walk over the crest of a hill, and not 10 feet in front of my face is a tent. This tent had been here for a long time. There was moss growing on the sides of it, and there was trash and shit thrown all around this campsite. Most concerning, though, was the pile of propane tanks. There had to have been 15 or 20 of those 5-gallon propane tanks. So we all looked at each other, and I said, "Welp, I guess this is none of my business." And we hurriedly made our way back to the fire, threw all of our shit in the back of the trucks, and made our way out of there in a hurry. On the way out from around the lake, we pull onto the main dirt road and pass a shitty little Toyota Camry with 5 dudes in it. Watching in the rear view, they pull onto the service road we just left out of. So, for those that aren't savvy to rural southern Ohio and haven't figured it out, 5 drunk idiots went out to a local backwoods reservoir to catfish and busted a meth lab in the middle of the woods. The owner of said meth lab tried to scare them away by throwing propane tanks in the lake. I can only assume that when throwing shit in the lake didn't scare us away, the meth cook called some of his buddies to scare us out. Or worse yet, the meth cook called his buddies after we saw his operation, in which case I'm glad we got out of there before they showed up. I went backpacking over Labor Day weekend with a couple buddies on the Relief Reservoir Trail in Stanislaus National Forest, California. It was a quick trip, 7 miles RT, Saturday through Monday. Beautiful trail that goes through meadows and mountain passes and ends at the reservoir. I've gone on several trips in the past, but this trail was the least untouched I've ever seen. Human presence was more obvious than usual on a wilderness trip. probably because we weren't that far off from the trailhead. Pacific Gas and Electric Utility Company own some land out here, so we passed by trucks, old equipment, and even a porta potty left behind from building and maintaining the dam, finished early 1900s, that borders the reservoir. We camped in a designated spot across the dam in proximity to the lake. There were 4 or 5 old stumps made from cut logs surrounding the fire ring. There were also a couple old tin boats that were stood up and securely tied to trees at our camp. About 30 feet away, there were groups of cut-down trees chained together. Not sure what for. Something felt off about the area, but I shrugged it off and figured PGE workers and day hikers hung out here too. Rest of the day was pretty ordinary. Went swimming, started a fire, had dinner. The weird stuff started when I went to bed. I got into my tent around 9:30 p.m. and about 30 minutes later, I hear this sound behind my head, maybe 20 feet away. It sounded like 2 small rocks hit against each other. The sounds are rhythmic, even 1 second pauses between each. I don't think much of it, probably a few pine cones falling out of a tree. Note that throughout both nights of our trip, absolutely no wind passes through our camp, so it's very quiet. Another 30 to 45 minutes later, I'm falling asleep. Then I hear the sounds again, this time further away in a different direction. Again, the sounds are rhythmic and sound like 2 rocks hit against each other. We didn't see any other campers in our area when we got in, and I listened to hear if anyone happened to be arriving late. No sounds of walking or voices, so again I ignore it and try to go back to sleep. Then another while later, the rhythmic sounds are back, coming from a different direction further away. No other sounds of rustling, walking, voices. My mind starts wandering. I try to think of what it could possibly be without going the route of supernatural. Other campers messing around? More falling pine cones? It's definitely not my 2 friends a couple. Our tents were huddled close together. I heard them sleeping and didn't hear their tents zip open and close. They're also not the type to get out into the dark to pull a prank. And I'm not the type to leave my tent at night to check out what's making sounds. I fall asleep again, at least for a few hours. I wake up around midnight and can't fall back asleep. Eventually I hear steps approaching my tent. Probably a small animal, I think. It stops at the back of my tent, and I hear it rubbing against my tent flap. This goes on for 15 to 30 seconds before it unsuccessfully tries to get under the tent flap. Then I hear the footsteps come to the front of my tent. It again unsuccessfully tries to get under the front tent flap. Strange thing about this whole scenario is that I don't hear any sniffing, just the rustling to get under the tent. Usually, a curious animal sniffs around, no? I get up and turn on the light. No sounds. I decide I'll let out my friend's name when the next odd thing happens. I stay up for an hour, writing in my journal about everything that happened, so I'd accurately remember the details then, instead of exaggerating later. I play Sudoku on my phone to get my mind off the whole thing. I place my knife nearby, sheathed. It's now 1:30 inches the morning. I'm feeling more calm and decide to go back to sleep, laying down, light still on. A few minutes later, I hear something breathe out at the back of my tent. Just one loud breath out, and it was definitely a breath. I didn't hear any steps from this thing, animal moving to get here. I lose it and yell out my friend's name a few times. He wakes up and scopes out our area, shining lights into the shrubby area behind our camp. We don't see anything. I'm spooked so badly that I move my tent closer to theirs. Morning comes and everything is all good again. I told my friends what happened and they didn't hear anything. One of them is a deep sleeper, snores loudly, and the other wears earplugs to block out the snoring. Another normal day passes at the lake. We go on a short hike around the lake and see there's a fire road with about 1 to 1.5 miles above the lake. A family of 3 had been camping there these last couple days. They were also swimming in the lake yesterday. Could it have been them on a late walk last night? Fire, dinner, go to bed. I decided to move 2 of the tree stumps from around the fire to the back of my tent, just in case anything strange happens again. My friend also gives me earplugs to help me sleep. Again, no wind passes through our camp that night. Several hours into the night, I hear footsteps. Not this shit again, I think. I try to stay asleep, but then whatever is out there touches my back tent flap again. The stumps I placed are snug up against the back of my tent, and I placed my tent up against some tall trees. I fall asleep. Never mind it, I'm tired. The next morning, we're set to leave. The same friend who I woke up the other night tells me something tried to get into this front tent flap around 5 that morning. Weirded out by my story from the other night, he stayed awake until sunrise. I've considered it could have been an animal touching our tents, but why didn't we hear any sniffing? Why did it stick around for so long and revisit us?